So on today's video I wanted to talk to you about the one that really did get away, and that band was Ran. So, Ran from Sunderland. Where do I start? So, the first time I actually saw Ran was in Skegness at a nightclub. So to put this into context, in the late summer of 1992, I happened to have a chance meeting with a guy that, I can't remember his name, I feel really awful about this, but he was in a sort of a band called the Betty Campbell Experience, who were based in Skegness. We used to go a lot of the Boston gigs, and I was actually, I think, in the second-hand record shop, the Emporium in Skegness, sort of probably dropping off some records, because they used to take some copies of my records and then they'd give me sort of sailor exchange for anything that was in the shop that looked interesting. But he was in the shop and he just said, "Oh yeah, I've been approached by TC's nightclub in Skegness to put on an alternative night." Now bearing in mind, TC's nightclub in Skegness was right on the seafront in Skegness. It was the most Hitman and Her nightclub that you could kind of think of, and the whole idea of having alternative nights there was kind of a bit of an alien concept. So, but I think they were really keen that out of season they could do a night that was sort of like different, an independent night, to keep local people coming into this nightclub outside of like holidaymaker season. So he said, and I sort of said, well, yeah, I could probably get some bands to come to that. So I remember, I think one of the first ones who we organised to go would have been Love Junk and Elmer Hassel. And the great thing was they were going to give a guarantee to the bands, and it was this really bizarre sort of concept of, it was basically an indie night in a Hitman and Her nightclub, where you had I was getting punk bands to come and play to predominantly goths, because in Skegness it was a massive goth scene. So it was a really odd kind of setup. And I actually sort of, because I'd helped organise like Elmer Hassel and Love Junk to play, what was happening was the bands would kind of play, and because it was sort of in the summer, and then also I was at university but coming home on a Wednesday or a Thursday in that first year because my lectures finished, it was on a Thursday night, so I'd literally come home, go to the gig in Skegness, and then bring all the bands back with me at like 2-3 in the morning to my parents' house and let them crash over there before they went off. My parents, they didn't half put up with a lot when I think back now. But anyway, so we did this, and I remember I sort of met the guy who owned TC's, and so I kind of thought, I'm over in Leicester, being a student, it was hard for me to organise a band for them for every single week. So I suggested they contacted Ian Armstrong, obviously running Meantime Records, who was doing a lot more tours and starting to do booking of bands as well at that point. And I think it used to be a godsend for Ian, because basically they could guarantee getting a really good guarantee for a band on tour on a Thursday night in Skegness, like if they started off in the north and were heading south, or vice versa. So anyway, this seems to be quite meandering, but I will get to the point. So over those sort of like last few months of 1991 and into 1992, I'd be regularly going back to Skegness, and I would see over that time Gan played there, Herb Garden toured with Sharon Tate's Children, the German band, Crane played there as well. Who else? I have a feeling Wordbug also played as well, quite possibly. Sofahead definitely played there. Blaggers ITA played there. It's quite weird seeing everyone going anti-fascist action in a Hitman and Her nightclub. And Instigators, when they did their tour before they went out to Europe, when they kind of reformed in 92 and recorded those 6 songs early in 93, they played there as well. So basically the alternative night in Skegness would involve sort of like what seemed like hours of goth music being played with people dancing to it, interspersed with a hardcore punk band where about me and 2 or 3 or 4 of my mates were going mad watching them play live on the dance floor because there was no stage, and all the goths would mysteriously sort of, drift off into the darkness in the corners. And I do remember there was this one guy who'd always come to these nights, and he looked like Elvis in the Vegas years, when all these winkle pickers, and he used to dance all mysteriously to Temple of Love by the Sisters of Mercy, and he got dubbed by all the bands that came Skeg Elvis. And everyone said, oh, I wonder if Skeg Elvis is going to be here tonight. I do remember that. But word did get around eventually, and I remember when the Blaggers played, a lot of people came over from Lincoln and Boston and things like that. But, some of those bands did play to a very hard crowd. But it might have been a hard crowd, but it did really help with the petrol money on the tour. But I remember one winter's evening, just before Christmas, I went along, and I wasn't sure who the band that was booked to go and sing, but I thought, well, I'll just go along anyway. And when I get there, there's Dickie Hammond. And he's going, all right, son, how's it going? As Dickie would whenever you see him. And he was there because he was doing the sound for this new band from Sunderland called Ran. And he says, oh, wait till you hear these ones. They're champion. Wait till you hear this band. You're going to love them and stuff. And I remember sort of not knowing what to expect, because I didn't know who Ran were, what it was all about. And they launched into John Says as their first song. And I was just gobsmacked and thought, whoa, this band is brilliant. So I think they ended up crashing at my house, and they gave me the demos. They'd done one demo before that, I think, called Order Through Chaos, which had the original bassist Stuart Raymond, who'd obviously been in Leatherface as well at the time. But he'd been replaced by John Livingston on bass. The rest of the band was Graham Kirk on guitar, Tim Nero on guitar and vocals, and Ian Syborn on drums. And they'd done a second demo called Total Chaos, which had John Says on it and A Transient Place and all these things. I remember just thinking, this is fantastic, this is amazing. I've got to do something by this band. But obviously in 1993 I had all the same issues that were going on with the label, in terms of cash being tied up, lost all the things. So it was a case of I want to put this out, but I'm not quite sure when I can do it. The original plan was to actually do a 7-inch, and that was sort of all put together. I think it was the demo tracks, and it was going to be called Little Tasmania. Now this obviously that 7-inch did actually finally come out about a year or so later on an American label called Shazbot. But the plan was that I was going to do the UK version of that. So they played my 21st birthday party in October 1993 in Leicester, where they played with Shutdown on that party, and stopped over at my flat that I was in with Julie, my one-bed flat at the time, all apart from Ian, because Ian actually was seeing one of Julie's friends on her year in her degree course. So Ian, the drummer, used to pop down to Leicester quite often over those next few months. But I remember soon after that we were talking about it and stuff, and then I got a call from either Tim or John or possibly Ian to tell me that Graham was no longer in the band. And what I think happened, there was quite an acrimonious split. I've never really spoken to Graham or the others about this, but there was a big falling out, and it never got resolved. Of course, Graham would go on to be in Rugrat with Ian Armstrong and Laney from Leatherface HDQ, which would then change their name to Boltaco. And then would obviously end up being in the final incarnation of Leatherface to date, and played bass for Leatherface for quite a few years, and also of course runs Little Rocket Records. But Graham had been the sort of band contact for everyone, but they decided they were going to carry on as a three-piece. Now, whilst this was all going on, I'd also been in touch obviously with Ansgar in RPN in Germany, and I was obviously sending him the stuff I wanted to put out, and he absolutely adored the Ran demo as well. And he said, if you're going to do an album by this band, then let's do it. I'd really love to do it. We'll get them over to Germany to tour, etc, etc. So the band carried on as the three-piece without Graham, and they went in and I think they recorded the Beautiful Songs for Ugly Children album really early on in 1994 from memory. So I remember we got the DAT tape, and I was blown away with the album that they'd recorded. It was fantastic. It was just a stunning album, and I was really keen, after not being able to get the demo out on 7-inch, that we got the album out. So RPN were going to pay for pressing it over there, so I sent the DAT tape and the artwork over to RPN, and then we just kind of waited. But as I've mentioned on other videos, the communication between myself and RPN seemed to be getting longer and longer and longer, and we were waiting and waiting and waiting. What then happened, of course, was that in the autumn of 1994 I started working at Earache, and as I mentioned on the shutdown video, that caused issues with continuing doing the label. So I was still really keen that it comes out, but we just lost total contact with RPN. We just didn't know what was happening, so it all kind of imploded. And as mentioned on the shutdown video, I believe, I did actually offer Dig at Earache if he wanted to put out Beautiful Songs for Ugly Children, but again, he didn't want to. 4 of those songs did eventually come out in 1996, I believe, on Snuffy Smile as part on a 7-inch, but the whole album has never seen the light of day. So when I started doing the label again, I was really keen to put the Ran record out. The only problem is that I couldn't locate Tim or John. Now, as an aside from this, sadly, Ian did die in about 2000. I was actually with Dickie and Jürgen from Rookie the day we actually found out that Ian had died. And I remember it was a huge shock to everyone, because he was a lovely lad, and way too soon. But I couldn't find Tim or John, and the problem is that there was the whole era with Graham was seen as one part of Ran, and the whole era after Graham is another part of Ran. So without being able to track down Tim or John, there was no chance of reissuing it. I would still love to put Beautiful Songs for Ugly Children out. So it's still not an easy thing to kind of organise, because without the band members who were in the band when the album was actually recorded, there's not a lot I can do. And also the only other option would be to do the early demos, but of course members who were in the band then aren't speaking to other members, so the whole thing has just been left in this sort of state of flux. Which is a real shame, because they were such a brilliant band, and it really bugs me to this day that nothing by Ran has appeared on Boss Tuneage. Maybe one day that will change, but for now I'm afraid that's it, and I'll speak to you on the next one.
Shadows will form for what it is, but the shadow we cast and may be our last. For what it is, blind fuck the blind, we've gotta take the pain. For what it is, on a stone black day, we're not going to play. For what it is.